Welcome back to the North Carolina Water Resources Research Institute annual conference. Normally we would be in person together. We're so pleased to be able to do this virtually with you to get our partners across the state and across the nation back together to talk about important water resource issues. My name is Susan White. I'm the director for the North Carolina Water Resources Research Institute, and on behalf of our team, we welcome you. As you know, it takes a lot to get this together, and so I want to appreciate Anna Martin and the group that we have, the steering committee that we had that pulled this all together. It's been great. If you weren't with us yesterday, we had an engaging keynote with Scott Berry from the U.S. Water Alliance. Following him was a wonderful panel that I think really sparked a lot of good questions from the audience. And then we rotated straight up into student lightning talks, which was really exciting. That whole setup for the students who did a wonderful job really kept things energized and gives us great hope, I feel, for solving the great water challenges of the future. Our winner yesterday, Jackie Hartman from UNC Charlotte, was a fantastic amongst all of the fantastic student presentations, and we're excited to have more students give lightning talks this afternoon as well after our keynote and our panel discussion. Today's discussion will sort of build on yesterday's in that I think one of the takeaways yesterday was that we decided that water is people and people is water, that they are intricately connected. And we really need to understand and build on those strengths of how we link the importance of water within communities and with individuals. And so we'll build on that with the theme that we're working off today, which is focused on community engagement and understanding how we can perform the work that we do in conjunction more successfully with partnerships. I think that's a big piece that you'll hear today, how we do that. So it is a pleasure for me to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon, Veronica Carter. She has since 2019 been serving as a council member for the town of Leland in North Carolina, just down the coast. She was a former civil servant and retired Army official with over 38 years of experience in managing complex logistics operations. And I would argue being a council member is a complex logistics. Good job. Thank you, Veronica, for your service both to the nation and to Leland. We've known Veronica for a while now. She's been working on the Coastal Resources Commission previously from 2008 through 2012. She's an active volunteer with the on boards for Cape Fear and Brunswick County Habitat for Humanities in the past, and on Leland's Parks and Rec Board. So those are great services. But really, most recently, Veronica's devoted a lot of her time ensuring environmental justice by empowering, advocating, and educating EJ communities in southeastern North Carolina. She currently serves on the North Carolina Coastal Federation Board of Directors, the Duke Superfund Advisory Board, and the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Secretary's Environmental Justice and Equity Board. Veronica has spoken previously with us on her roles when starting the Brunswick County Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters, a great set of acronyms there, VOAD, and that supports the county's long-term recovery groups post-storms for the most part. And so we welcome a Brooklyn native to North Carolina and look forward to Veronica, you sharing your perspectives with us as we kick off today's discussions. Thank you very much for joining us, Veronica.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Everyone hear me fine? Yes, yeah. No, I got a few heads. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, good. Now, first of all, let me just let you guys know, I am not a scientist, okay? You haven't, that may not be clear. So thank you for inviting me. I'm still trying to figure out why you invited me, even though that was a great introduction. I'm honored and humbled that the thought that a political science major would be the keynote speaker for an annual conference of hardcore hard scientists. And if you were expecting to get a bunch of slides, surprise, you're gonna have to listen to me here for a little bit. So I asked, why on earth do they want me to speak to this really just great panel? I listened to you guys yesterday, great presentations. You guys are brilliant. You're doing some really important work for the residents and citizens of this great state that we live in. But I mean, frankly, I took science for the non-major and rocks for jocks, AKA geology, as my two science requirements for my undergraduate degree way back when. But you know what? I'm your keynote speaker, and this is just another unlikely journey that has become my life. I am a career Army officer. I received my commission as a second lieutenant in the Army from Fordham University Army ROTC, which is in New York. And when I joined the Army, I actually planned to be a lawyer and have the Army pay for it. But I learned something along the way. And this is kind of interesting because yesterday in the breakout groups, a few people said, I have no idea what I'm going to do when I grow up. Don't worry, I still am trying to figure it out myself. But I learned that I was really good at managing resources. We talked about that with logistics, supplies, services, maintenance, transportation, and of course, the most important resource, people. So I'm a logistics officer, and I actually like it because it's like instant gratification. People need something, you got something, you get it to them, they're happy. Bingo, what a deal. But it wasn't what I had really thought about doing when I started my career, if you will, my post-undergraduate time. So how on earth did I end up here? You know, well, one of the things I discovered was I really didn't care about making a lot of money. Now, don't get me wrong. I like nice things. I am a Lexus owner and I'm on my third one. So my idea of being hardcore is when you have to stay someplace that doesn't offer a hot breakfast in the morning. But after spending 20 years and 8 days in the Army, and I always say 8 days because you actually have to go to the end of the month in order to retire. I left the Army, and the first thing I did, because I was waiting to hear from my dream job, was I made this crazy thing. I was going to go into the for-profit business arena. And so Frito-Lay, PepsiCo offered me a job as the zone business manager for Queens and Brooklyn. I was the lady. If you needed some Cool Rancher Doritos, I was your girl. And I discovered I could care less if somebody in Kew Gardens didn't get their Cool Rancher Doritos. So I was incredibly thankful. I actually left it before I found out that I had gotten my dream job. And I went back and took a big cut in pay. But I went back to work as a contractor from the Army. And shortly after that, I got the news that I had been selected to be a logistics officer for the Africa unit in the Logistics Operations Section, Field Administration and Logistics Division, Department of Peacekeeping Operations at the UN Secretariat. That's exactly how I used to answer the phone. That's why I can just let it roll off my mouth too. I got to work at UN headquarters, you know, so here's a kid from Brooklyn, New York, PS 91 graduate, who would see those little yellow school buses show up at UN headquarters, and I want to shake every one of those little public school kids and say, pay attention, you might actually work here one day. So I've actually been to a lot of these African countries that most people can't find on a map. And unless you are into some serious geopolitical situations you probably never even heard of, like Guinea and Mauritania and Cote d'Ivoire and Sierra Leone. And I actually spent 3 months in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I've been to third world countries. I thought this was my dream job, but after 5 bouts of malaria, parasites and 1 bout of malaria, it wasn't very hard to convince me that maybe I needed to leave and move to Southeastern North Carolina. Some other things happened, and I needed to move my dad out of Brooklyn. He and my mom lived in Brooklyn for more than 50 years. My mom passed away, and my poor dad, I'm an only child, was there by himself. And I decided we needed a change of pace and someplace simple. And hey, I'm a career logistician. I can work anywhere. And so we moved here to Southeastern North Carolina, to the Leland area. That's what they call this back then. LA is what the locals call it. It was not always a positive thing, but it was the Leland area. And my dad, my 74-year-old dad at the time, got his first house ever. Okay. I'm a first-generation college graduate. My parents were both very smart people, but they were never blessed with the opportunity to go to college. And that's what I'm going to call that a blessing, because I saw people in Africa and I used to wonder, what on earth did they do to deserve this? Why was I born in Brooklyn and these people were born in Burundi? That's nothing more. I'm a person of faith, but an act of God and a blessing. And so I believe that when you're blessed, it's so that you can be a blessing to somebody else. Hold that thought, we're going to come back to it. So here I am, the career logistics officer. How on earth did I become the environmental activist? Well, not long after my dad got his brand new house, we discovered that about 7 miles away from him, there was going to be what could only be described as a mega landfill. 750 acres, 750 acres, let that sink in, full of something called auto shredder residue, AKA auto fluff. After you take everything that's recyclable out of a car, you're left with stuff. And a lot of that stuff is like mercury switches and oils and preservatives and mostly carcinogenic. And oh, by the way, incredibly flammable. Well, they were going to put this stuff in the ground in liners, and we were not going to notice it, even though the permit said it could be 350 feet tall, because they were going to put trees and grass on top of it, and we were going to have our own little Mount Fluffmore or something. Now, yesterday, one of your presenters talked about the topographical makeup of the coast, that you could go like 30 miles inland from the coast, and the elevation is still like, 14 to 15 feet above sea level. Where exactly are you going to put these liners full of this stuff? And all liners leak eventually. And it wasn't going to affect the water table. This site that they were going to put this in was, oh, by the way, in a predominantly African-American town. Now, this is kind of interesting because I live in Brunswick County. If you don't know where Brunswick County is, it is the county that is the most southeastern county in all of North Carolina. I am 50 miles away from Myrtle Beach right now, okay? Horry County from South Carolina is our neighbors to the south. But here we are in this predominantly white, I'll go ahead and say that word, predominantly white county, about 74%, while the town that this site was going to be in, this 750 acres, 350 foot tall mega landfill of stuff, was in a predominantly African-American town that had at the time over 90% African-Americans in it. And this same town, in this big county, because we're a rather large county geographically, had, oh, by the way, one Superfund site, and of the 5 brownfields that are located in our county, 4 of them were in the Black town. So it's here that the kid from Brooklyn first discovered this term called environmental justice, or probably more importantly, environmental racism. Now, I'm gonna tell you something, I'm a pretty simple person, okay? Because the Army likes to keep it simple. Usually we call it the KISS principle. The most senior rank in the enlisted field is Sergeant's Major, or E9. And as a cadet, my first mentor was a gentleman called by the name of Charlie E. English. He was our ROTC Sergeant Major. He had been in the Army 30 years and I was only 20 years old. So I figured if anybody could tell me about being in the Army, it would be him. He had daughters who were older than me. And he kind of took me and a few of the other African-American cadets under his wing, because he was our only African-American cadre member, and taught us what he thought we needed to know to be successful, because we were basically going into a predominantly white and predominantly male profession as an Army officer. And so I kind of had a kindred spirit with Sergeants Major. I just felt like they were these wise old guys who took young officers under their wings and took care of them. Do any of you remember the old TV show, Kung Fu? If not, go look it up on Netflix. It's really a cool thing. So forgive me if I date myself here. The chief character in Kung Fu was this old Buddhist blind monk, Master Po. Okay? Master Po was like the Sergeant Major. And even though he was blind, the young student who was Kane, he was the guy who was, the storyline was always about. He was the young, soon-to-be monk in training. Even though he was blind, he could still kick Kane's tush whenever they would, he could throw an arrow at him and he would know where it was and deflect it and all that good stuff. And Kane would ask Master Po like these really good questions, really easy questions, like, Master, what is the meaning of life? And Master Po would just look at him and give him like a really simple answer. And Kane would kind of give him the RCA Victor dog look, like, what did that mean? That's like a young lieutenant with a sergeant major. And so when I became a young lieutenant and I had my new sergeant major Muskovitz, I asked him one day, Sergeant Major, what does it take to be a good officer? You've been around for 30 years. What do I need to do to be a good officer? How can I get my troops and my superiors to respect me? And he said, whatever you do, whatever the job or mission is, wherever you go, make it better than you found it. And I gave him that RCA Victor dog look, like, what are you talking about? Make it better than I found it. What do you mean by that? He said, well, I'm gonna tell you, LT. By the way, if a sergeant major really likes you, he calls you LT, that's short for lieutenant. He says, if you go into a town and their streets are all littered and messed up, before you leave, even if your soldiers didn't mess it up, have them clean it up and take the garbage with them. If you get there and things look a little run down and need sprucing up, get some paint and have a paint party, paint for them. Patch some roofs, fill some potholes, fix a drinking well. When you leave there, they may not remember your name. They may not remember your unit, but they're gonna know that they are better off after you came and left than they were before you got there. You made it better than they found it, and they will have a good feeling about Americans and American soldiers after that. That became kind of like a really good piece of advice just in life. Make things better than you found them. It's almost like a takeoff on the golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated. So let's get back to the landfill in Navassa. So I knew I needed to make Navassa better than I found it. It wasn't my town. I technically lived in Leland, and it technically wasn't my dad's town. It was literally in between the two of us. But here was this ASR that data said, that scientific stuff that y'all like to play with, said was a carcinogenic. So I needed to not only show that, but needed to show that this particular town had been purposefully dumped on and left to its own devices to find help for. This county, Brunswick County, is one of the fastest growing counties in the country. My town, the town of Leland, do a little brag here, we are the fastest growing town in North Carolina and one of the fastest growing towns in the country. We're doing great, even through, thank you, Lord, COVID, we've been doing wonderfully. Our neighbor, Navassa, that predominantly African-American town, not so much. That didn't seem right. That didn't seem fair. That didn't seem just. And that just didn't sit well with me. And so I needed to do more research because I needed to get someone to pass a bill. Now, I hadn't used my political science degree in the 20 years I was in the military. All of a sudden, here I'm in a new state, I'm going to pass a law. Well, we got the Solid Waste Management Act passed in 2007. And I say we, because I discovered that there were other environmental justice towns, just like Navassa, that were either predominantly African-American, Indigenous, Hispanic, or socioeconomically disadvantaged. That meant they had poor whites and poor Blacks, and they all had mega landfills going in next to them. They were like these communities of least resistance that people didn't think could fight back, but so they could dump on them. But we weren't going to put these in the nice, pretty subdivisions. That's just not right. And now the one permit that DEQ has in its arsenal to use against these things that has an EJ, an environmental justice component, where you have to take environmental justice into consideration before you issue that permit, is from the Solid Waste Management Act. All the other permits don't have that, and we're working hard to change that. So we made things better than we found them. I told the town of Navassa I wasn't going to leave. And some of those different things that they wheeled off there, Susan wheeled it off about things that I do, I can tell you that there are 14 habitat houses now in the town of Navassa. I can tell you that we're fighting coal ash, we're fighting wood pellets, and we're even working to get their super fund actually cleaned up. We're a lot closer than we have been in a long, long time, and we're going to be working on an economic development plan for the town. All of these things are a way to try to help them clean their brownfields, find a green path, get economic development, and make it better than I found it. But here's where all of you come in, because you're brilliant. I listened to your many presentations yesterday. And while I understood most of what you talked about, yeah, I actually did, really, even as a political science major, I had to learn a few things in the Army. Most of the people who will be helped by your findings and your research will not. Now, never forget that what you do isn't just about getting through your thesis or your dissertation defense. It really isn't. I know you got a lot of student loans, but it really isn't about that. It's not about getting the next job. It's not about getting published in a peer-reviewed journal, no matter what they say. You do this to help people. It should be. There are people out there eating fish in those waters that you're studying, or maybe the fish that you're studying, but in those waters that you're studying that are contaminated, they're eating the fish that are in it that you know aren't healthy, and you can prove aren't healthy because it's the only source of protein that they can afford. There are young children and pregnant women out there being exposed to chemicals that you may have discovered that are more harmful than other chemicals. But the folks that are eating them don't know, or they don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to tell people. Help us. This is bad. This is wrong. This is going to hurt us. There are elderly people and folks with compromised immune systems who are breathing air and drinking water with chemicals that are literally taking away days, if not years of their lives. They need you. I need you. Because frankly, gang, remember, I'm the chick who took the science for the non-major and the rocks for jocks thing. Although I do know a little bit something about Palisades diabase, but we digress. I need you to help me understand what you're doing and to be able to tell legislatures and to tell people who are in positions to change things, so what? You're not going to allow this to happen, or we're going to sue you into oblivion. Either way, lawyers or legislators, same things in many cases in North Carolina. So we need to know what you're doing. I don't need you to defend your dissertation. At some point, you're going to have to break it down to people. That's what I think they call community engagement, right? My parents were very wise with, frankly, above average comprehension skills, but they never made it to college. I mentioned that before. Both of my grandfathers were coal miners in West Virginia who didn't make it past the 6th grade. I cannot imagine myself explaining something to them, like what I've done at the UN or what I did in the Army, and making them feel small, making them feel like I was talking down to them, making them feel that they didn't really understand what I was doing. I wanted them to be proud of me. I wanted them to understand what I was doing. I wanted, when we were sitting across the table at Thanksgiving, and hopefully soon we'll be able to do that, I wanted them to understand that, hey, this is going to be something good. This is really going to be something good, and have them go, guess what my daughter's doing today? She's working on such and such, okay? I can't count the number of times my mother would literally put something in a FedEx or Express mail envelope and with a note that says, I'm going to call you to talk about this on Sunday. And then she would call me up and say, okay, did you read what I said? She was getting a money's worth from my college degree. I don't have any problem with that. But I would explain it back to her. But I learned a technique. I learned this not just from my mother, but actually from soldiers in the Army. I'd ask her, will you tell me what you think it means? Explain it back to me in your own words. Okay? If you have a presentation and you tell someone, tell me what you think I just said. And if they can't explain it to you, then I got to tell you, they didn't really understand it. Okay? So you need to be able to translate all those brilliant things that you're finding and presenting so that people understand it. Tell you a story. We're post Florence, working with a young lady who works 3 jobs. She lives in a house with her 2 children and 1 grandchild that's been in her family for 3 generations. Oh, by the way, it's heirs property. That's a whole nother story and speech. But we got her fixed with North Carolina legal aid. But here she is, doesn't have a day off, was absolutely exhausted, didn't have the right kind of insurance. She didn't have flood insurance, didn't have wind and hail, which she needed to get her house fixed. So we're out here trying to figure out how we're going to fix her house. She breaks down and cries. We pray together. I tell her, I don't know how we're going to get it fixed, but we're going to get it fixed. We got it fixed. But I also got her a case manager because she needed that. Now, her case manager, brilliant young lady, had just graduated with her master's in social work. Yeah, I know, touchy-feely kind of stuff, but stay with me here. You'll follow me. But she just defended her master's thesis. She's ready to get her LCSW. She's trying to get all her points and stuff. I suddenly get a call one day from Mrs. Bryant. Mrs. Bryant says, hey, Veronica, what's up? I'm like, hey, what's up, Miss Bryant? No, by the way, that's the colloquial language indigenous to my people, okay? I'm from Brooklyn, so I get that. So she said, listen, I need you to call this chick that you sent me with, and I want you to tell her to tell you what she just told me. Then I want you to call me back and tell me what she told you. Now I'm driving when she told me this. So I had to pull over for a second because I had to smile. And I said, so let me get this right, Mrs. Bryant. You want me to call her and then call you and translate what she just told you? Yeah. I said, because you didn't understand what she just said. She said, nah, sometimes she talk, and she's fast. That's what they'll tell you, that you're talking too fast. Nah, they need you to break it down a little bit more, okay? I said, okay, I'll do that. Now, the young lady, the social worker, was actually Hispanic, and she was a first generation. Well, we had actually spoken before. I just wanted to get to know her a little bit better. First generation college graduate. And when I called her up and said, listen, I just talked to Miss Bryant, and she wants me to ask you what you said to her so I can go back and translate. Now, she's Hispanic, and she knows that Miss Bryant's first, in English is her first and only language. She's going, what do you mean translate? I said, she has no clue what you just said. I said, I think whatever you presented to her, I'm sure it was very professional, but Mrs. Bryant is not your professor and you're not defending your thesis. You're gonna have to like bring it down to a level where she gets it. The woman was crestfallen. She was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that she didn't understand it. She told me, I said, calm down, tell you what we're gonna do. I said, I need you to meet me at Mrs. Bryant's in about a couple of hours, okay? Because Mrs. Bryant will be home. Okay. Mrs. Bryant called her back and said, hey, listen, I talked to her. She's gonna come by the house. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to be a teacher for her. She went, what? You want me to teach her? I said, yeah. I want you to make her break it down to where you understand what she's talking about. Okay. Okay. I said, because you're a smart lady. You can do this. I said, heck, you work at 3 jobs. I can't even imagine that. They managed to make it happen. And they used that technique because I told the young lady, I said, think of Mrs. Bryant as your grandmother who only speaks Spanish and didn't make it past the 6th grade. Okay, she wants to be proud of you and know what you're doing and what you're working on. How would you explain it to her so she didn't feel bad, but she understood it? She goes, oh, okay, I can do that. And then have her repeat back to you in her own words what you just told her to make sure she really did understand what you told her. 2 of them became fast friends and they managed to continue to work together after that. You see, what we do here is that we serve people. I truly believe in the concept of servant leadership. Without people, your brilliance, frankly, isn't that important if you don't have somebody to tell it to, whether it be your peers, your professors, a peer review journal, or the people that you serve. So take time, learn how to translate your findings to everyday people, because you're going to need them to continue your research. You're going to hear a little bit more about engaging with the community. Let me help you. If they like you, and know that you'll keep them in the loop and respect them enough to come back. And let me just say this, if you go to a neighborhood and you do research on folks, go back and tell them what you found. Don't just use them as some sort of guinea pig or a lab mouse or something. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that complaint. People come here and they make us fill out these forms and then we never hear or see what they do with it. Go back and tell them, because you're probably going to need them again to do some other stage, some other phase of your study. Show them that respect that you would want if you were in their shoes. And they will be there for you. They will engage with you. Whatever you do, whatever that job or mission is, and wherever you go, make it better than you found it. Because they may not remember your name, but they are going to remember that they were better off after you left. And trust me, when it's all over, you're going to be better for it as well. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've enjoyed this talk with you, and I look forward to hearing any questions or comments you might have afterwards. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Right on the money, as always. Thank you for those really inspirational stories. And I think we'll see it come through in the next series of talks. We're going to hold questions until we have Christy Perrin, who I'm going to change off to here, until we have the Q&A with the panel as well. So many, many thanks, Veronica. And Christy, over to you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I really appreciated your presentation. Sorry, I'm messing with my screen here. There we go. I am happy to introduce our panel of speakers today. We have 4 speakers coming up. I'll tell you what the order is. We have Evan Kane speaking first from Wake County Environmental Services, and then we will go to Amin Davis. I want to make sure everyone can hear me. Susan, can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. I forgot to put my headset on. I've been on how many Zoom meetings and I forgot my headset. Okay, we're going to hear Amin Davis, who will be representing Partners for Environmental Justice. He's also with Department of Environmental Quality. Then we will hear from Dr. Bethany Cutts from NC State. And then we'll round out the presentations with Tatiana, who is also from NC State University. So we're really excited to hear from all of them. So first off, I want to introduce Evan Kane. Evan is the manager of groundwater, of the groundwater section of the Wake County Department of Environmental Services. He oversees programs for permitting and inspection of private drinking water wells and programs for outreach, testing, and technical assistance for private well users. Prior to coming to work for Wake County, he worked for the North Carolina Division of Water Quality and Water Resources for 14 years, developing and implementing programs for groundwater protection. He is also the chair of the City of Raleigh's Stormwater Management Advisory Committee, so you can talk to him about stormwater too. Evan is a North Carolina licensed geologist and has bachelor's and master's degrees in geology from NC State. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Evan, and feel free to share your screen if you have something to share.
Okay, thanks for that introduction, Christy. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay,
Yes,
Christy?
yes,
okay, good.
indeed.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
All right, so the title you've got listed for my talk here is Engaging Communities in Private Well Water Improvement. I'm going to speak on this from the perspective of a county agency dealing with a particular contamination issue. There's a lot of different ways that private well users get engaged depending on what agency is reaching out to them or whether it's an NGO or the particular issue that they're dealing with. And there's really no one community of private well users. So we'll just use one case study sort of as a backdrop for some observations about working with private well users. So in 2018, Wake County recognized that we had a problem. The testing we'd done on wells across the county showed that 1 in 5 of the wells that we test in the eastern half of the county had unsafe levels of radiological contaminants. And 1 in 5 wells in Wake County, in the eastern half of the county, amounts to about 4,000 households that were currently being exposed to unsafe levels of these contaminants and did not know it. So first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one, but we recognized that we needed to then do something further about it. I almost didn't put this slide in here yesterday, but yesterday Scott mentioned that part of the One Water approach was recognizing the role of geology, and we have to point out that this is a geologic contaminant, and it doesn't respect county boundaries, so we know this is not just a Wake County issue, and that plays into our response to this. So in order to develop an effective response, we began looking at some key questions. What is our obligation? And we realized our obligation as a county agency under the current paradigm for private well users is to notify, but then also to support people as they process that information and try to figure out what to do about it. We had to think about how residents would respond once we have notified them. We have to think about our capacity. We have a limited budget, as everybody does, and how are we going to serve people effectively while not swamping the lifeboat? And then we also have to think about the impacts on other stakeholders. Those other counties that have the same geology, they're going to get the same phone calls, and they need to be prepared. People who need financial assistance are going to call financial assistance organizations. Those folks need to be prepared to handle that. We, through a program that Caroline Loop initiated with the county in 2013, we actually had quite a bit of experience with notifying people about potential contamination in their well water, and it kind of worked out the basic 7-step process. You notify people. You have an intake step where they can call you, they can get your services for well testing. We send people out in the field to collect water samples, we test them, we interpret the results, and then we communicate that information back to the well user and give them advice about health risk, how to fix it, and then if need be, help them get to mitigation. I should say the mitigation is probably it winds up being someone else's problem than the county typically, because if it's a man-made contaminant, we're going to be trying our best to hand that off to a state agency that deals with these types of things. And if it's any other kind of thing, the responsibility for that mitigation is going to fall to the well user. So this is sort of the idealized effective response. You go through these steps, you get everybody's well water problems fixed, right? The reality is, looking at it from the county's perspective as an agency with a particular budget and mission, we are capable of quite a bit of notification. We've got a communications office, we can do printing, we can do mailings, next door, Facebook, all that stuff. Intake, there's sort of a dichotomy here. We have an online system where you can submit a well water testing request at 1 a.m. if that's what's keeping you up that night. But we also know that it's not very user-friendly, and you're probably going to call us for problems putting in that application. And we have like 4 people to answer the phones. Sample collection, I've got 3 guys. Sample analysis, laboratory capacity is pretty good. Results interpretation, we got 6 of us basically. Post-test technical assistance, 6 of us to deal with this. And mitigation, well, that's another potential bottleneck in the process. One, because there may not be very many treatment installers out there. The finances may not be there for the well users, so on. But from the county's perspective, we identified really 3 to 4 key bottlenecks in mounting an effective response. And then we think about the resident response. How does the community react to this kind of notification? We can layer that on top of here like this. This is an anxiety curve. And it starts off on the left before the notification hits with a false sense of security, because most well users have not ever tested their well water. And then the news hits and it goes straight to fear. Now, as public health folks, we want a little bit of fear because that motivates you to test your water. But the fear that we actually confront usually is fear of us, fear of the financial impact to your property if you do get the testing and the results are bad. Trust, what are we really trying to do here? Then we get people into the process of, if they actually follow through and get their well water tested, then there's going to be impatience because the lab's going to take 3 weeks under good conditions to get your test results. And while you're waiting, your anxiety may be building. And then you get those test results, and if they're good, we follow the solid red line down to an informed sense of security. But if they're bad, we follow that dashed line up and you get the confirmed fear, only now it's a new fear. Well, now it's fear of the health consequences, as well as the fear of financial impact, the sticker shock of what it's going to cost to fix that. And maybe you get to mitigation. Maybe you can pull together the money to pay for that. Maybe you don't. At the end of that curve, depending on which of those paths you might follow, we hope we can get you to security, that you know how to deal with this well water problem. You've been able to deal with it. But if you were not able to deal with it, you may arrive at resignation, which is a different form of low anxiety, but not the one we really want. So with all that in mind, we consulted with a wide variety of stakeholders from private labs. We recognized we wouldn't be able to do this without sending people out to private labs. We wanted to make sure those labs were capable of delivering the volume as well as the tests. We reached out to state agencies, non-governmental organizations, healthcare providers, municipalities, water treatment companies to make sure they were aware of these things. And then, of course, on the right, our own partners within Wake County government, most importantly, the people that hold the purse strings and have the regulatory authority. And from all that, we mounted a campaign where we mailed out 19,000 notices to residents in Eastern Wake County in English and Spanish, containing 5 key take-home messages. 1, the likelihood that you have contaminated well water. 2, the importance of laboratory testing. 3, if we mistakenly sent this to you on a community water system, you don't have to worry about this. 4th, these problems can be fixed. And 5th, where you can go for more information. We set up a web page to deal with this issue, particularly with a short URL. We set up a telephone hotline, open 24/7, with operators who speak English and Spanish. We put a video online of how to collect a radon sample for water, since sample collection is really key to getting that right. We held community empowerment meetings throughout the affected area, 6 of those over the span of 2 months, where people could see us face to face and basically hear those 5 take-home messages again. And then a short while later, after people began to get their well water test results back, we had monthly technical assistance meetings where you could bring your test results in and just say, I don't know what this means. They told me to talk to you. And we would have people there to walk you through it. This was actually probably the most fun part of the whole project, was that we actually got to sit down side by side with well users and not just talk to them about their test results, but also listen to them talk to each other and compare notes on experiences they had had with different contractors or how they were planning to deal with it, so that they could find the way together. We also realized we needed to make sure that lower income residents could afford the testing. We had a program for providing income-based discounts, but we needed to make it simple. There was some amount of accountability required, but keep it simple. Low income people have to fill out all kinds of paperwork and prove themselves to be poor all the time. And we wanted to keep it as minimal as possible while still checking that accountability box. Upshot of this is we had a lot of web page views. That's not a terribly meaningful number. We got 1,300 phone calls about this topic over the span of 2 weeks without crashing the county phone system. We helped 100 people afford testing through reduced cost testing. We had over 600 people come to our community meetings, and we got 1,200 additional wells tested. Now, 1,200 compared to the 19,000 that we think are out there is a pretty small percentage. That is 3 years of our normal capacity. And so we're pleased with that. That's about a 7% response rate. I will put in contrast to that, the response rate among lower income people was probably less than 0.5%, so 100 households. And that's probably in large part because of the financial impact of bad results. One other thing I'll note in this is that for every person who got their well tested, we received a phone call. That's actually something we've seen in other unplanned outreach events that have happened in the past, that basically the process of getting notified about something, every person who gets that notification wants to, if it really matters to them, they want to call and hear a human being read it to them and say the same thing that they've already read, if they're serious about following through. So there's a one-to-one relationship between people acting and people wanting to talk to a person about this.
I'm gonna jump in.
Am I over?
We're yeah, we're
Okay.
gonna have to wrap up, but take just a few seconds to wrap up, and we'll have time after everybody's done if you have some major points that we don't have time to get to.
This is me. I'm happy to talk to people after this or during the meeting. Thanks.
And thank you so much. That was really interesting. And I heard you say something that Veronica said, to keep it simple. So I'm going to keep amplifying these things that I hear throughout all of your talks. Very interesting and meaningful work, Evan. Okay, now I would like to introduce our next panel speaker, Amin Davis. Amin was born and raised in New Haven, Connecticut. He obtained a Bachelor of Science in Marine and Environmental Science from Hampton University and a Master of Zoology from NC State. Amin is an environmental scientist with over 20 years of professional experience. I have to say, I think I've known you about that long, Amin, and it's been great to work with you.
Likewise.
He conducts environmental and water resource management in public, private, nonprofit sectors across 9 states throughout his career. A wide range of water resource work as well. He's been employed by the Department of Environmental Quality in North Carolina since 2008 and is currently a community grant manager for the Division of Water Resources. He also co-leads the Walnut Creek Watershed Action Team and is a board member of Partners for Environmental Justice, a nonprofit based in Southeast Raleigh. And he will be talking about Green Makes Sense, negotiating green stormwater infrastructure and community benefits. Take it away, Amin.
All right. Thanks a lot, Christy. And incidentally, Christy is through her work with the Black Creek Watershed Association, which I'm going to speak about in a minute or two, is kind of where I first learned about watersheds and kind of have grown in my understanding of that since then. But I want to thank our WRRI for allowing me to speak to you. And I'm going to give you a heads up right now that I've crammed more information in this presentation than I can cover in 10 minutes. So basically a PDF of this will be available and you can reach out to me directly if you'd like a PDF of this. And before I continue, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So let's see, sorry about that. All right, so these are the things I was asked to talk about, and I'm really going to try and focus on the community engagement aspects of basically these are lessons learned from community engagement and collaborative partnerships that I've been involved in with key stakeholders that have resulted in the integration of green infrastructure into site development projects for 3 local projects in the area. And I'm going to talk about these projects within the context of the first 3 items at the top of the screen. So the Black Creek Watershed Association, or Black Creek Watershed, drains into Lake Crabtree. This is in the northern part of Cary. The first project I'm going to talk about is the red line to the south. And then the second project I'm going to talk about will be the deal with the red stream to the north that drain into Black Creek. So the issues here, and that little arrow is, if you know where Bass Pro Shops is, that star is where Bass Pro Shops is at the intersection of Harrison Ave, near the intersection of Harrison Avenue and Interstate 40. So this first, and for transparency's sake, I live in this neighborhood as well. So but I want to play this video. This just kind of shows the upper dam in a storm and water going over the front of that dam. And for those of you who are in water resources, you know that's not a good thing to happen on a dam. So this is the lower dam along this stream. And the spillway is basically head cutting or eroding back towards the water, in addition to the fact that that spillway channel cuts across the face of the dam. It basically makes a right angle and cuts across, which is a horrible thing for the structural integrity of the dam. So this was the HOA has been trying to address this problem literally for decades. So the actions that they took to try to address this problem are listed here. And I want to focus on a water resources valuation that a coworker with the Division of Water Resources did. And I also want to focus on the fact that the Black Creek Watershed Association was able to receive 3, well, not just the Black Creek Watershed Association, but the group of partners were able to obtain almost $580,000 for, instead of repairing the dams, they selected to breach the dams and restore a whole stream corridor. So this is kind of an overview. And then basically the decision point that was the valuation I'm going to tell you about right after this basically showed that residents would have had to pay $500 per house to pay to repair the dam versus forfeiting the grant money that would be used, to where there's no out-of-pocket cost for the residents to restore the stream, and as Veronica said earlier, to make it better than it is. So I'm not going to get into the weeds of this valuation, but essentially on the left, this barrier evaluation tool showed that the dam was not meeting its percent use ratings. And this barrier evaluation tool took into consideration not just environmental concerns, but social concerns and economic concerns of the community. On the right, the second part of this valuation assessment was basically, it looked at the ecological return on investment based on the cost of doing ecological restoration of streams and wetlands, and essentially showed that there would be over $50,000 value added through breaching the dam and restoring the stream versus just doing a dam repair. So as I noted, up in the top left, there's Christy. She's representing Black Creek, spoke to our community. On the right, I'm sure you know that gentleman. He's a kind of a tech guru for DWR and develops a lot of community science applications. Cam McNutt. The gentleman, these two gentlemen on the bottom left, are the HOA president, and the gentleman sitting down is the ecological engineer that helped to restore, to come up with this proposal. And then the gentleman on the bottom right is one of the funders. So basically, there was a lot of community engagement over a period of years to get to that point. Water resource concern number 2 is just upstream of this area. And you can see this, the picture on the left is a horrible stormwater pond behind the Arboretum at the corner of Weston Parkway and Harrison Avenue. The picture on the bottom left, you can see that this stream had eroded to within about a foot or two of this walkway or greenway here. And there's also a dislodged pipe that the arrow is pointing to. On the picture on the bottom right, basically our community had to pay $20,000 to have this stream, just about 75 feet of it, relocated from where it is to the left to where it is on the right. And you can see how good that looks. And that's a great example of green infrastructure and how this type of work can be done to help public safety and reduce infrastructure loss. All right, so this is just an overview. I've kind of already given you a background. The actions here, the Black Creek Watershed Association members, we attended a town rezoning meeting and inquired about whether the developers of this hotel property were going to incorporate green stormwater infrastructure into their development. Basically, to cut to the chase, Black Creek Watershed Association we basically met with the developers and asked them, explained our concerns to them, and provided them, we basically asked them if we told them we would be willing to apply for grant funding to help them. So we were able to receive $210,000 for the developers to do this. This is a site plan. And basically at the top, you see the elements: permeable pavement and bioretention and a constructed wetland. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into what those are, but this sketch was provided by NC State Stormwater Engineering Group, who also partnered with us on this project. And as part of the community engagement, the HOA sent a letter to the town of Cary planner about this rezoning, and basically stated that we would only support this project if they implemented low impact development and green infrastructure, and also that the developer would need to provide financial compensation if they messed up the stream restoration that had been done, that I showed you the picture of before. The picture in the top right is the town council meeting where they were going over the rezoning for this. And the picture on the bottom right was a kickoff meeting with the developers on the left and WRRI and Stormwater Engineering Group person kind of talking about this grant and trying to make it work. So the last project I want to talk to you about is the Downtown South rezoning project. I'm sure if you're from Raleigh, I'm sure almost the majority of you were familiar with with that. But basically, just to give you some context, the picture on the left is an article that basically talks about how Walnut Creek is the most flood-prone area within the city of Raleigh. And with that, Walnut Creek flows into Southeast Raleigh, which is a historically underserved part of the city. Partners for Environmental Justice was actually founded in Rochester Heights, which is the first African-American community within the city of Raleigh. The picture on the top top right is flooding from Hurricane Fran. The picture on the bottom shows Little Rock Creek, which flows right next to the Walnut Creek Wetland Center, full of trash, full of sediment, full of tires and other things, just an incredibly degraded urban stream. So the Downtown South project, just to give you some context to the watershed, is there. Rochester Heights is here. So you have a historically underserved community that had faced environmental racism for decades, less than a mile downstream from this proposed 140-acre property development. So the concerns I just stated, the actions that led to kind of a mutually beneficial conclusion were that Partners for Environmental Justice, which is a nonprofit that I'm a part of, it's based in Southeast Raleigh, One Wake and other partners met directly with the developer. And essentially the outcome of that meeting is that as part of the rezoning conditions that are built into this project that will apply throughout the course of all the development, the developers have agreed to not only, they're going to have to do above and beyond stormwater mitigation, but they also agreed to put funds as they develop this site to set aside up to $2.5 million worth of funds that will be used by a stakeholder group that PEJ and the developers, it's basically being developed, that will go towards providing matching funds for improving water quality, mitigating flooding, and helping to restore streams, not just basically within the entire watershed. It doesn't have to be, this just doesn't apply to the Downtown South site. So
I'm gonna
I know my time is
in, Pete.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was just an amazing ending. I'm gonna let you wrap it up.
Yeah,
I'm sure people are gonna have questions. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up here. So I won't get into that, but basically the lessons learned, basically non-environmental community benefits can often play can carry greater weight in decision-making in terms of what happens with development communities. I'd encourage people to, Scott Berry did a great job of talking about One Water yesterday and how everything is interconnected. So basically for folks for that understanding to be more broadly taken into account in not just water resources management, but land management as well. And thirdly, in terms of leadership opportunities, if younger folks can really learn these lessons listed above, they can become leaders in water resources management. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry I threw a lot of information to you. Feel free to reach out to me, and thanks again.
Thank you, Amin. I know there's a lot going on to talk about. And hopefully we'll have some time after the last panelist to get back to some of these issues. So next, I'm going to introduce Dr. Bethany Cutts. Dr. Cutts is an assistant professor of human dimensions of the environment and geospatial analytics in the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management. She has a number of research focuses, anyway, her research projects focus on resource equity in the science policy nexus. And her talk is partnering with communities on research using an example in Robeson County. Take it away, Bethany.
All right, thanks so much, Christy. This has been such an exciting session to be part of, and so much of what Veronica introduced really resonates with the approach our group takes to research. So this idea of make it better than you found it, right? Like, how do we operationalize that as a university researchers, and like a pretty giant university at that? Like, this university is about 6 to 8 times larger in terms of its population than the town I grew up in. So when I think about it that way, like being part of kind of like this mega institution is a real opportunity to evaluate the institution and how it partners with different organizations and businesses to advance a public good. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to come to that like framework for understanding what it means to be a white lady who's invested in environmental justice research. So for me and my team, which includes a large number of community partners, other experts in other fields, and students with a range of different interests, this means giving back at least what we take, right? Investing in community, training students that are smarter than me and who I don't want and they don't want to grow up just to be little mini-me's. That would be extremely boring and disastrous for us all. Thinking about how to amplify changes communities are asking for with resources for the university, and really taking seriously the role of changing the capacity of the university and other larger institutions so that they involve, invest, and transform their commitment to social justice and the environment in ways that understand those things as part of the public good that a public institution is invested in. And then to think about how we get over all the ways inequity is automated in our systems, to think about how we might better automate equity. So I really appreciated a lot of what was coming out of Evan's presentation in terms of their process and how they were thinking about just the burden and the privacy stress that comes with often with applying for assistance, and how could they just do their part to make that as easy, seamless, and uninvasive as possible. So our work is focused on, and a lot of our work partners with folks in Robeson County, North Carolina. And I'm going to try to share a video to kind of let you see some of the thoughts that they've shared with us as part of a community voice project we've been working on for the last few years. I'm going to share as much as I can.
Have I seen any change in policies? No. Have I heard that the city council is studying a particular issue and call for community help? No. We don't see, I don't see, and I can only speak for myself, I don't read, I don't hear, I don't see that much change in agencies or bodies who are supposed to be behind the growth and the functions of the city, of the people at work. I don't see it.
But things are better. Preparation. We know what areas flood the worst, the fastest. There's currently construction and agreement with CSX in Leland where there was friction. There's a recent agreement, and not only that, they have Leland, they have CSX, they have the citizens.
I do think that after Matthew and Florence and Dorian, if you've heard, there's been a lot of conversation about clearing of the rivers and canals and debris. So I think we're going to see, because it's already begun with the river clearing, we're going to see more of that. So I think that's going to be change for a benefit for the greater good. Is we're going to start seeing some of this cleaning, clearing the riverways. You'll see some of the landscape change for that, which is a great process for me. It's for the good. So I think that kind of change we'll see, and then just the reorganization of some of these neighborhoods with the buyout program.
When you're talking about flood resiliency, there's no magic bullet or a magic pill that cures all ills. It's building the berms around the water plant, around RIMPAC. It's creating the floodgate at CSX. It's doing the drainage project in the Tanglewood area to take the water off of the hospital. It's cleaning out all of the drainage canals. It's doing the stream restoration project. It's the acquisition of homes and businesses that are in the floodway. It's the elevation of homes that are in other flood-prone areas. It's clearing and snagging the river to remove those root masses and treetops that are going to clog that up when it rains. And when you do all, no one of those is going to fix everything. But when you do them all collectively and you diversify that effort, you can make an impact.
Avoidable in some places, but it should be the last resort. Community, because it's flood prone, and we'll just tell all these people that they have to move somewhere else. You can't do that. You destroy history, you destroy community bonds, you create upheaval in people's lives that can be seriously traumatic. It may be unavoidable in some places, but it should be the last resort. We really need to put our human smarts into figuring out how do we do less damage.
Look at the river as it winds down the rise like a tear going down Cheekside Creek to the body of blood salted gold and holding the life of our own. Though we look at the river as it...
All right, so I didn't have time to share the whole video with y'all, but this is just a piece of the work that we're doing. And some of the things that we've done that are a bit different than normal social science research is that we gave people the opportunity to share their stories and work with us on interviews in public formats that could be constructed together into dialogues that are part of community deliberation. So bringing together people asynchronously and synchronously, as we're all becoming more familiar with through technology, meeting them where they are physically, working with community interview specialists to get beyond some of those trust issues or differences in just personal backgrounds and knowledge that come with being in Raleigh versus being in Robeson County. So working with Sally, Margaret, Hannah, Nathan, a range of different community interview specialists to hear more than, or at least differently than we would hear if we sent students and faculty alone. And that's been to great effect for our work. I submitted a number of links where you can, to the chat, where you can check that stuff out. I really wanted to turn over a lot of the time to the community, but the approach, this community voice method, has allowed us to do soil testing and provide those results to individual residents. An important thing that emerged was that it wasn't only the people that participated that needed the results, but community leaders as well. We've been able to think about geospatial representations and develop user guides in ways we might not have otherwise, and to continue to iterate and evolve our partnerships within the university to respond to different needs. So, you know, in line with some of the other things that we've heard, just really rethinking how we not only think about seeding good partnerships, but cultivating soil to make those partnerships work, and to really recognize that we have, yes, technical expertise we can bring to the partnership, but if we come with the right mindset and listen with the right ears, we can bring a lot of the innovation and knowledge back from the long histories of community members to inform and innovate in terms of how we approach our science and think about data and conventions for analysis. So I've lost track of time, but I want to leave plenty of time for Tatiana.
You were like 2 seconds before my timer went off. In fact, there it goes. It's hard. 10 minutes is hard. Thank you, Bethany. It was right in line with the themes that we're hearing, and some messages you left with, or meeting people where they are. I think others have alluded to that. Okay, so now we're going to introduce our last panel speaker, and that is Tatiana Height. Tatiana is a native of Chicago, Illinois, but has made North Carolina her home for over 3 years. Tatiana holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a major in Great Plains Studies and minors in Environmental Studies, can't say it, agribusiness entrepreneurship, you say that 3 times fast, and community regional planning. As a part of the Great Plains Studies program, they pursued 2 emphasis areas in land and environment and culture and community. Later, they received a Master of Community and Regional Planning degree while also working full-time as an integrated water management planner for the state of Nebraska. Going back to One Water there. Presently, Tatiana is pursuing a Doctor of Education in Agricultural Extension Education and work in the environmental justice sector. So Tatiana, you can go ahead and share your screen if you would like.
Yes, I do. I was very close to not making any slides, and then I was like, I'm gonna forget what I want to say if I don't make any slides. So I made just a very few amount of slides. All right. So yeah, this is just gonna be sort of general reflections on my experience in government, university, and nonprofit. I'm working on sort of environmental and water resource engagement. So you've already heard that I worked as a water management planner for the state of Nebraska, but I've also worked in local government, I've worked in university, and I've worked in nonprofit. And I've noticed that as I've transitioned between different spaces, people receive me differently, and I have to sort of adapt certain parts of my understanding and how I engage with people because of that positionality. So this is what this is going to be about. So firstly, I just want to comment on some of the things that I've noticed when engaging with people in my work in government. So firstly, it's that there's going to be dealing with legacies of mistrust. In government in general, in particular with me, because well, in general, but I tend to work with marginalized communities. And so there's an understanding there that communities have been consistently disenfranchised a lot of times by government. And so when I'm coming and trying to engage with people and I'm coming as a government official, that's something that I have to acknowledge is this whole long history that people have been dealing with in maybe their own lives, but also perhaps just their general community and culture before me, and what does that bring to our engagement with one another. Also, it's this notion of public servant and accountability. So when you're coming from a government perspective, people are kind of like, my taxes are paying for your salary or whatever, like kind of you work for me kind of stuff. And so having to address that, but also me having to acknowledge that, yes, I am here to serve the public, and coming with that mindset of trying to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the community. And then consensus building being a central priority. So primarily when I was working for the state of Nebraska in the Department of Natural Resources, we were working with farmers and ranchers in rural Nebraska. I lived in the capital, but the communities that I served in the district that I was over was in rural Nebraska. And we're trying to bring together all sorts of different stakeholders, people in the community who all have their own different concerns and their own issues, and trying to bring people to levels of agreement. And so that sort of that comes with a lot of trickiness and trying to then balance, especially when thinking back of people's own experiences with government and their expectations of you, trying to balance then the different needs of everyone and get everybody on the same table, as well as then sometimes you've got lower level government or organizations who are also in the room and trying to balance them and their relationships and getting everybody to agreement. It can be quite difficult and quite lengthy. So sometimes working on planning processes, in particular water management, this group was meeting for years, trying to come to consensus. And the plan that they were working on is done, it's published. It's like it's a 30-year plan, so it's done. But it took years to get to that level of engagement. And it took several meetings just to unpack the trust. And even there were some issues with bringing in consultants and having to bring people off of take people off of the project, I should say, who weren't serving the mission and weren't helping to build that consensus. And so being responsive to those needs when stakeholders in the room are saying, we don't like this person and how they're doing this, and this isn't working for us being responsive and being ready to make a change. And then also just recognizing that usually that engagement is prompted by general statute. So there's actual legal regulations that are put in place that says you have to engage in this process, you have to contact this many people, you have to publish it this many ways. And so there's something that's sort of coming there that's forcing the engagement, whether it being instead of it just being sort of organic, but it's more of an obligation. And then also, this is more in my experience in local government, being expected to be sort of an in-house expert when I'm presenting at council meetings and that sort of thing. People are kind of expecting me to be sort of an insider with some information, some expertise. Then transitioning into sort of university engagement. And so what sorts of things am I encountering there with this kind of engagement? Firstly, there's then legacies of extractive behavior. So things I've come across with are people who expect that if you're an academic, you're coming from a university, that you come to their community to just research them, to poke and prod, to take some information and to take it and leave. And so having to work through that and overcome that is something that I found to be very important when engaging from a university standpoint. First of all, acknowledging that is valid and true and that communities have had that experience. And then how do we work through that and how do we not duplicate those experiences? And then overcoming this elitist idea. So there's also in communities who are kind of like, you're coming in, you're maybe the most educated person in the room. And so for me, it's been trying to level out that line, democratize that level of communication. I am no more of an expert than you. I am not smarter than you. I am not wiser than you. You know what's important for your community. I might have degrees in the area, but you have firsthand knowledge, and my knowledge is not more valuable than yours. If anything, maybe your knowledge might be more valued than mine, and coming to that level of understanding and that communication from that space. And it's also building trust and spending time, because another thing that comes up is communities who are concerned about students who kind of rotate in. You're getting your degree, maybe you've got a student who's only on for a semester, who's only on for an academic year, they come and then they move on. And so how do you balance actually having a long-lasting relationship in the community? Because if you're going to build trust, you need to be there for a while and have some opportunity to have that foundation. And then acknowledging that in other cases, in that government setting, I might be accountable because of government regulations. And in this setting, I might be accountable to my funders and who's putting my grant, and how am I making sure to do everything that I'm supposed to do for those obligations while also meeting the needs of the community. And a part of how you can work on that is just making sure, maybe involving people in that grant writing process, which we actually experienced on a project I'm working on right now, and having some conversations around what does that look like for the project beforehand, instead of coming up with this idea and then comes to the community after. But anyway, moving on. So then from the nonprofit sector, instead of the good and different thing there, in this government setting, there's this legacies of mistrust that just come from government in general. In the university setting, there's legacies of extractive behavior that are just coming from sort of academia in general. But in the nonprofit space, you sort of get to chart your own legacy. There's not sort of already an expectation there. It's sort of you getting to build your own legacy about how you're going to engage the community. And so it's important to start to develop that from, the first time that your organization is established, and then to also carry that from the beginning to the end, or to the future with your organization, not having that just only the beginning or only at certain points, but making sure to build that relationship consistently. And then there's the expectations are now that you're a grassroots leader. So there's an expectation that you're sort of out in the community. And is that always true? You never know. And then an expectation that you have sort of a community expertise. So instead of coming from that in-house expertise level, there's an expectation that you're sort of an expert on the community, sort of in line with those residents. And then there's changing dynamics in public meetings then. So if you're sort of in that, the way that people are receiving you as a government person when you're as an in-house expert at meetings is totally different than you're sort of the nuisance who's continually advocating and showing up at public meetings and pushing your point, and being accepted totally differently in that case. That's definitely something that I had to overcome, is that, I came from this experience of when I go into a public hearing, people are the officials are really wanting to hear what I say versus coming to a space where it's kind of like, don't come in here saying the same thing over and over again. You know, we've heard you, you know, that kind of thing, and that differing dynamic as sort of being a trusted ally versus a thorn in someone's side. And maybe you need to be that thorn if the issue is important. So not saying don't, but just acknowledging that that's a dynamic. And then having more flexible lines of communication. So there's different ways that you can communicate. It's not necessarily, oh, you have to have X amount of meetings, you have to have X amount of stakeholders, you have to advertise it in this way, it has to spread, you know, this much, you have to contact people within this many feet of whatever it is that you're doing, but more so being able to set your own communication lines of the community. And so you can organize your own meetings. You can go door to door and do canvassing. You can maybe have an impromptu meeting with only 2 days notice because you don't have to wait a certain amount of period to engage with the public. And so it becomes much more flexible, and there's differences there and benefits there. And then the differences though in soft money. So where does that do with your building trust with communities? There is a problem, and I've seen this in communities where there's hundreds of nonprofits come in, they only have money for a year or whatever, they run out of money and then they're gone. And so how do you overcome that expectation in community? So basically the general trend within all three, I would say, is building trust. No matter if you're in government, university, or nonprofit, it's going to be important that you've built trust with the community, and that you know, they feel like you're somebody that they can come through and that's going to try to address their issues and is actually going to care. Transparency, so having openness with your lines of communication and being super open about where you're getting your information from and where it's going to, and then having strong and long-lasting relationships.
Thank you, Tatiana. That was really interesting to see you pull together these different viewpoints depending on who you work for and how people see you, and then how you have to respond to that. It's complex. We have a few minutes for questions for our speakers. I don't know if any popped in through the chat. I don't think so, unless Frank, you saw any. But now is the time. And I'm looking. Let's see. You can raise your hand, or I know I do. Bethany, are you raising your hand? I see Susan and I see Bethany. Susan, I'm going to ask you first, and then Bethany.
Thanks so much. This was a really great setup for the conversations that Veronica kicked off and everyone that we heard yesterday. Sort of a overarching question for all the panelists. You know, there are some similarities in the challenges of repetitive funding in a single community with our funders. You know, the review panels often say, "Oh, you've been in that community before. We need to move on." That's something that we see and we hear. How would you address that because of that continuity and that trust building need to sustain engagement and be in that community to support it?
I guess that's me. I would definitely say that is why it's important to have inside relationships with those folks, or at least inside conversations and dialogues with the people who are putting out the funding, so that they can be aware of those kinds of things. Because I don't think that it's always true that the people who are writing the RFPs are knowledgeable about community engaged scholarship or have even worked in communities themselves. And so I would definitely be trying to have conversations with those people. And it's the same process of relationship building, because it's not going to work, quite frankly, at the last minute after it's already put out. You're not going to be able to change their funding priority on the, after the call has already been put out. But if you already have that relationship on the front end, or even can be on the inside of some of those conversations. You know, sometimes folks are looking for people to be on their boards. They're looking for advisory committees, getting into some of those spaces and putting out those kinds of things, which people will see me in a lot of different spaces because I'm always, you know, inserting in there to make sure that those kinds of considerations are on the agenda. But I would definitely make it known about what sorts of things you're hearing back from people in the community. Even having people from the communities to be able to make themselves present and share some of that stuff, so it's not coming from somebody who's sort of an outsider, I think can be useful and valuable. And then I think too, for me, because I would imagine that at some point in my career, I might be putting out one of those things. And for me, something that's been important is to have gotten actual experience on the ground in communities and not just go and get the doctorate. And I've never actually worked with anybody or actually been out on the field. And so that's been super important for me.
Thank you. Bethany, do you want, your hand is still up. I don't know if it's intentional.
I don't know how to put it. Oh, I'll work on that. But I was thinking about Susan's question from the perspective of the funders, right? And they're like, well, you know, we want you to cover the whole state. So how do you make, but I think like that trust, the trust part is really hard. And I think if you generate sort of these iterative projects where you're not necessarily engaged, like thinking now, I'm working with some engineers who are trying to put together an engineering research center. And the idea is like, they're like, can you just get some letters of support from this community? It's like, no, I can't. Like, that's a research project. And I've been working on it for 4 years. Like, I can, if you can help with these next steps, then I can do that. But the engineering funding mechanism and that kind of flashier level of science is a lot more, I mean, in the National Science Foundation and other organizations has a lot more power than I do as a community-based researcher. And I see that even in, like, I had 2 excellent students put in NSF graduate research fellowship program applications. And the one who's doing the big data stuff, data justice, got it. And the other one got dinged, mostly because she's doing local research. And she's phenomenal. So thinking about like how to leverage those deep connections and I think the word in this application they're putting together is maybe a good one, like a test bed. And figuring out like these are our deep investment test beds, and we expect that, you know, through things like the way Evan's working, or the types of like strategies that Veronica is developing, or the patterns and knowledge that Tatiana is bringing in because of her experience, that there's opportunities to change the way we do other forms of science. Pop up kid. And so, you know, I don't know. I mean, I think about this a lot in like my daily life. Like, yeah. Like on the one hand, like university organizations and agencies are like the clients of the funding institutions that provide us, but we also have like some of the stuff I know Jane has been involved in, like thinking about like how to set the agenda in particular ways and define the research questions and the values. And so I know her work in kind of like, what does DEI mean? And I'm gonna just butcher it, Jane. So you. I'm
gonna cut it there, but thank you. I just want to get to Veronica before we have to go to our student lightning speakers.
I was just going to say that I think the idea is to put your pride aside and realize that you need to, it's so important to go back and let the community know what you're working on and be willing to tell them what you came up with, because you may not be able to finish it. You know, one of the advantages of being military is that we're taught to make sure that we realize we're not always going to be there. We may die, we may retire, we may move on to another assignment, and you don't want everything to fall apart when you leave. And so I think scientists need to be able to do that as well. I know it's your pet rock and you love it and it's your research, but if the community knows what you're working on and there's some grassroots groups there that you could help maybe mentor and become 501c3s on their own, they can take that research, you know, that's a stepping stone, and they know where you wanted to go with it. They might be able to get funding that you didn't think about and bring you back as a consultant.
That's a great idea, supporting the grassroots groups. I think we have to move on now. I don't know where the time flies, but I want to thank our keynote speaker and panelists for their great talks. I think there's at least one question in the chat that I would ask our panelists and Veronica to take a look at from Stephanie. If you could address her question in the chat sometime in the near future, I would appreciate that.